Hi everybody, welcome to Tidalwave Studio. My name is Damiani and today I would like to share with you one or two little tricks to get really smooth vocals. We are going to listen to a song by an artist named Khumo and a song named Burning Circles. And we are going to listen to the intro and see if there are one or two details that we could optimize a little bit.
Burning circles on the dance floor, moving here with me tonight.
Okay, that sounds really nice. She has a beautiful voice, but there is one little thing that we could tweak a tiny little bit to make it even softer, and these are the consonants. Many singers tend to put a little bit more air into their consonants while singing than absolutely necessary. And this could turn like a T into a T and so on. Let's listen to one or two of those consonants and see if we can sweeten them a little bit.
Moving here with me tonight.
This T from tonight, for example, it's not tonight, but it's tonight.
Tonight.
One way to address this would be make it lower in volume and shorten it a little bit. Let's do this and see what it sounds like. I take the whole T, reduce the volume, and just move the start a little bit to the right and merge this. And then we have
tonight, tonight,
instead of
tonight.
That would be so much softer and just more sweet in such a soft intro. Another thing would be
on the dance floor.
For example, this little D from dance floor, it has like a little whistling in it.
Dance floor.
Not really bad, but we could improve it a little bit. Let's see how we can do this. Let me pull up spectral editing. I send this little section to spectral editor, and here we can see that D, and here we can see this whistling portion of it. And if I attenuate this a little bit and send it back into Pro Tools, you can already see how softer it got.
On the dance floor, the dance floor,
instead of
the dance floor.
Subtle, but details like these, they really sum up. And if you think about maybe putting another compressor on top of the vocal, then those consonants often are overpronounced after the compression because many compressors are not quick enough to really catch those transients, and then they stay there and everything else is compressed. So you change the ratio of consonants to vowels, and then the voice always sounds pointy and seems too loud, although the vowels are fine, but it's just the consonants poking at you. And by editing, clip gaining, and maybe removing some elements and shortening those consonants, you can really sweeten up a voice in a very easy way. It's a lot of handwork, but I think it's well worth it. Let's have a look at another little thing. Sometimes you have the impression that a word is really much too loud and you want to compress it to put it down, or you want to automate it down. Although sometimes it is just like one portion of a word that is really poking at you, like a resonance or like a overtone that is in the voice, and that's just the only part that is a little bit annoying for the ear, but it's not the whole thing. So sometimes it's a good idea to just get rid of that little thing that is poking at you instead of pulling down the whole voice. I'm going to show you an example. This ready has like a pretty harsh component to itself. It's something that is really poking out and makes me want to pull that syllable down a little bit. Let's listen again. There's a harshness in that ready. Let's see if we can get rid of only this little harsh portion on that one syllable instead of putting something on the complete track and just messing around with everything that was fine, instead of just going in and zooming in on one little problem area and getting rid of that little problem. I'm going to send this into a spectral editing tool and see if we can get rid of that little thing. Okay, here is this ready, and here we can see this harsh portion up here. There seems to be one overtone that is really poking out at us. Let's remove that a little bit. Without touching anything of the foundation of the voice. I'm sending it back, rendering it, and let's listen.
Set here ready, ready.
And before.
Ready.
So now we lost that harshness without touching anything around on that voice because everything else was perfectly fine. So going through a vocal performance and listening to every word and trying to fix little things right on that spot instead of putting like an EQ on the complete vocal track is a really, really good idea. You keep a much more natural vocal performance because you don't have so much processing going on and you are only really just fixing what needs to be fixed. Okay, the last thing I want to show you here is how I created the reverbs around the voice. Especially here in the intro, the voice is pretty much alone on its own. So you really need to be careful not to create a fake or plasticky atmosphere. So if you put too much of one reverb on the voice, it just sounds like obvious reverb. So my go-to method here is to use many different types of effects at once, and instead of putting a lot of one, I'm putting tiny doses of many different types of reverbs and delays. And just like cooking in the kitchen, instead of putting like 5 kilos of salt into a dish, I'm putting a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, a little bit of other spices, and the blend of all these is going to be much nicer than just putting a lot of one in. I'm going to show you what I used here.
Burning circles.
So we had 10 different flavors used here. I'm going to bypass them all and then adding one by one and showing you what I used. So this is completely dry.
Burning circles.
Okay, the first I use is a little dose of Bricasti set to a studio setting. So it's just emulating a nice little room, which gives the voice already the impression of having taken place in an actual room instead of like a dead closet or something, and opening up a first amount of space behind the voice.
Burning circles on the dance floor.
It's immediately more natural than completely dry. The second that I like to use is a little bit of EMT 250. Showing you. So this is an emulation of an old digital reverb, which sounds really sweet. And I used an EQ before going into the reverb. So cutting off all low end and all high end. So to only send the mid-range into the reverb, which often sounds just sweeter because you don't get all the S's that go into the reverb and sound splashy, and not all the rumble from the lows that may also clutter up the low end when you're sending this into a reverb.
Burning circles on the dance floor.
So now we have a little bit of room, and then we have something with a longer tail giving a more fairy tale-y atmosphere. The next is the tiniest amount of an 1/8 delay. Let's listen to this.
Burning circle.
It's really just a tiny, tiny dose, but it's adding a little extra layer of depth. The next is a tiny, tiny dose of a plugin called BM60, emulating also an old reverb.
Burning circle.
I've set it to a plate setting with not too long tail. And again, it's very subtle, but These are adding up, and just building a really dense atmosphere. The next is a tiny dose of quarter delay.
Burning circle.
You can hear the repetitions, but they are very soft. They're really hiding behind the piano that is still playing with the voice and hiding behind the other words. Then, what I really like to use is something to widen the voice a little bit so that it's not like a point source, but it appears to be a little bit larger. And what I usually use here is a plugin from Waves, which is basically just pitching up one side a little bit and pitching down the other side a little bit and giving it a slight delay. So you just have different information on the left side than on the right side. And if you add this a little bit underneath the dry vocal, it will just spread out the voice a little bit and let it sound a little bit larger than it actually is.
Burning circles on the dance floor.
Okay, the next is another reverb. What did I use here? A plugin called Crystalline, which has a nice clear sound to itself. And I think I also, cut off the high end again going into the reverb because I didn't want the S's to trigger any reverb and give it a splashy sound, because this is something that really often shows reverbs immediately. If there's the S and the S goes into the reverb and it starts getting splashy, that's not really nice sounding. And it's not very natural, because if you are, let's say, in a church and you are far away, and if you say something, your S's are not going to splash around. It will sound much darker. And by rolling off the highs going into a reverb, you really avoid this splashiness and you get a much more natural sound. Let's listen to this.
Burning circles on the dance floor.
Again, a little extra layer. Now, I added the tiniest amount of 16th delay, so really very short little delay.
Burning circles on the dance floor.
Very subtle. Then another tiny amount of stereo delay, something that has a little bit of movement.
Burning circles on the dance floor.
Let me solo that for a second. I just show you this one.
Burning circle.
Very soft. And finally, another reverb that is emulating a big room.
Burning circles on the dance floor.
And here, before going into the reverb, I used a de-esser and an EQ, again cutting off more of the high end and of the low end and some of the mids, because some reverbs, they just don't handle every frequency range in the same way. Some reverbs, they can get annoying if you put in too much 1 kilohertz or something. So if you feel that the reverb is like getting annoying in a certain frequency range, instead of cutting out that frequency range from the reverb, cut out this, that frequency range on the signal going in, so the reverb is not even making this signal or this annoying frequency longer and more obvious. It's better to EQ on the way in than on the way out. Here's the actual reverb from Tegela. It's called Raummaschine. It's a pretty long decay that I used here. And on the way out, I also cut out the low end again. So on the way in and on the way out, because some reverbs, they tend to do something on their own, maybe boost a little bit the low end or boost the high end. So really go in and EQ all that stuff out that you don't want to hear. Everything that is giving a hint that a reverb is going to become artificial, just cut off all that stuff and add in tiny doses of different other flavors until you feel you have enough reverb without having like a really obvious cloud of reverb. And this is the final result.
Burning circles on the dance floor. Moving here with me tonight.
Okay, I hope you like this approach, and maybe that is something that you want to try out for yourself, just combining many, many different flavors and create one special, unique, and new flavor for your music production. Thank you for watching. I hope there was something of value for you here, and see you in the next video. Bye bye.